Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar is going to be a little bit different from our usual webinar fare. We're going to kind of play the hits. We're going to do kind of a miscellaneous approach to today's webinar just because we've noticed there's a lot of repeat questions that our support team has been getting. And so we kind of wanted to put information about those common questions out in a unified place. So today we're going to be doing a topic, we're just calling it Your Burning Questions. But what we're doing is taking the most common questions that we've been getting in our sport queue and just kind of wrapping those up into one combined webinar. And of course, we'll do a bit of Q&A. And if you've ever been on a webinar and said the webinar isn't, about the topic that I wanted to ask questions about, today's the day to get your weird questions in. So if you have questions at the end that don't necessarily pertain to something we've talked about, still feel free to kind of toss it in the chat or the Q&A for us so that we can, answer some more obscure questions if you've got them. Before we get started today, let's go ahead and take a look at some housekeeping. So you'll notice all of your microphones are currently muted. We're going to keep them that way throughout the webinar. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar where you can submit questions. Myself and my teammate Sam are in the meeting today, and we'll be swapping off some of our topics. So while one of us presenting, is the other one will be keeping an eye on the Q&A and answering questions throughout. Finally, there's also going to be a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. So you can find our YouTube channel at clubexpress.com on YouTube. That is with the dot spelled out. So it's ClubExpress, DOTCOM. You can always subscribe there to see all the whenever we have updates or whenever we have new information. We'll always have videos, new tutorials, new webinars, new announcements on our YouTube channel. We also exist on other forms of social media. We have a Facebook page, LinkedIn, so on and so forth, all the other socials. Finally, before we get started, if you have any opinions about how Club Express is doing, we love to hear from our users. So you can always head to clubexpress.com/reviews. And we've got links to a handful of review sites that are really impactful to our users. So you can go there and leave reviews about how we are doing. All right, so let's get into the webinar today. So the topics we're going to face before we get to the Q&A at the end, we're going to go over just some of our most common questions. Those are going to be things like, how do I reset my member's password? We're going to cover what an event refresh does and how we can use it to kind of like kick our event to make sure that things are working. We're going to talk about how to manage group and family memberships. So some organizations have family memberships, some organizations have business memberships, and they may have members that are connected to another primary member. And we'll go over how to kind of tweak those and manage those and remove and add people. We're going to take a look at how to schedule blast emails so we can set those to go out at a future date. And we'll show you how to make an email ahead of time and go ahead and set it to get sent out. And then you can just let it go out on its own without you having to go press the send button. We're going to take a look at how to remove an event from the calendar. So something that happens a lot is people will cancel an event and that event will still show up on the calendar because that's something that it's actually supposed to do to let people know that it has been canceled. But in a lot of cases, people want that event completely off the calendar altogether. And we'll go through the different statuses that you go through when you are removing an event from the calendar. We're also going to take a quick look at forums. We'll go through the difference between a listserv and an online forum and how people may or may not interact with online forums via email or just by logging into the website. We'll also take a look at the website header and footer. So we'll take a look at how to kind of modify the website, the top and bottom, and possibly even the sides of your website. So if you're ever editing your homepage and you realize, hey, my header has an old logo in it, I want to update that, you can go in there and I'll show you how to access the top section of your web page and edit that. And then finally, we'll talk about club titles and contacts. That is something that often gets confused because we have two different sections for editing who is in charge of your club. There's titles and there's contacts, and there's also emails that are put in there. So we'll go over some of the best practices about how to kind of assign people to president, treasurer, membership director, those kind of things. We'll go over how to make sure that those are all set up correctly. So let's get into it. The first question we're going to take a look at is about password resets. A very common question we get is, how do I reset a password for my member? Oftentimes people will forget their password, or they'll get locked out, or they'll get locked out of their email if they've changed work. One thing we get asked a lot is, how do I just reset a password for a member? So I'm gonna, in just a moment, I'm gonna screen share. And I'm gonna show you how to email a temporary password to a member. So there's an option in the control panel for us to just shoot a member an email that has a temporary password for them to log in with. There's also an option to reset a password without sending them an email. So if you have a member whose email address has changed or they no longer have access to it, or they're just having trouble getting those emails or seeing it in their inbox, we'll go over how to reset that email without using or reset that password without using an email. We'll also show really quickly how members can use a self-service option for resetting their own password. And then finally, I'll show you how if you have group memberships, like we'll be talking about in a little bit, you can actually allow your group leaders, so your primary members can reset the password for their secondary members. So let me switch over to my screen share really quickly. You should now be seeing the Northwest Balloon Club. This is one of our demo websites. I'm currently logged in as the administrator, Martin Smith. And what I'm going to do when a member asks to have their password reset, I'm going to go ahead and click on the control panel. And when we want to reset a member's password, we head over to the People tab of the control panel and we click on People Manager. This is where we'll do a lot of our controls for our membership, and resetting a password is one of those. So we'll head into the People Manager. And from here, we can pick any member that we want. We can just search for a member using this little search tool in the People Manager. But really, all we need to do is just search for a member's last name. So if I wanted to reset Greg Cho here, we can just search for Cho and say, show me all of the Chos so I can go and reset their passwords. Once I've searched for Greg, I can come down here and see there's Greg Cho, and I want to reset his password. If I click on the pencil over in these icons over here, you can see in this legend icon, our pencil is our profile. So that's what I want to click on to get into this Greg's membership profile. And as an administrator, the first place we would go to reset someone's password is over here in the bottom right under your website functions. There is a reset password button. There's two different things this reset password button might do. If we look over here in the summary, you'll see that there is no current email address. So if I were to reset this password, it'll say, do you want to reset the password for Greg? And I will say yes. Because Greg doesn't currently have an email address, it'll say password changed. New password is Greg4907. It's usually going to be the first four letters of their first name and then a randomized number. When Greg next logs in using this temporary password, it is going to force Greg to set a new permanent password. So this is not Greg's password forever. This is just a temporary password. Once Greg logs in again, he will set his new preferred password. And we can either text this to Greg or call Greg and tell him. We can write it down on a piece of paper for Greg. However we want to give this to Greg. Now he knows that he needs to log in that way. If he's forgotten his username, it'll also give the username right there, Gcho. So that's one way to reset the password. If Greg does have an email address that he has access to, so let's go into our basic member information, and we will just assign an email to Greg very quickly. Go down here to email address, and I'm just going to say test@test.com. And I will save that. And we'll see now Greg has the email address of a little test email address that we have there. If we were to hit reset password, it's going to say reset password for Greg Cho, and we will say yes. This is the same process we just did, but now it says new password has been emailed to the member. So this will send an email to this address, and it will have that same information we just saw before. So it'll have the user's password, a temporary password, and the user's username. It will not send a permanent password via email, so it will still do that process when Greg logs in again. It's going to assign Greg to set a permanent password. So those are the two options. Again, these are both only options for Greg to do himself. So Greg needs to go and log in with that temporary password and set his own. If we wanted to reset our own password, there is an option for members to kind of self-service reset their own password. So let's say they are able to log in already and they wanted to reset the password that they're currently using. Let's say someone is, judicious about their security and they want to change their password every year. We can go up to our own member profile. So you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, I'm currently logged in as Martin Smith. I can go to profile here, and this is going to, instead of being on Greg Cho's profile, when I click Martin Smith and click profile, It's just going to say member profile, and you can say, this is my own member profile. And when you're on your own member profile, you'll notice under your website functions, there is no reset password option. The password option when you're in your own profile is actually its own box right up here that says username and password. This is where a member can, once they're logged in, they can go and change their own username and their own password. And if you click on this, it will take you to a page and it will show you your username and it will show you your password. And you can come in here and you can update your own username and you can update your own password at will. If you are logged out of the system and you don't know your password, but you don't want to rely on an admin, you can also reset a password without even logging in. So let's say I'm not able to log in as Martin Smith. Let's go ahead and log out. And I will go to the member login page by clicking on member login in the top right corner. You'll see there is a username and password option. If I don't know my username and password, there is always the forgot my username password button right here. And when you click on this, you'll see email address and first name. If you fill in both of those items and then hit OK, it will check the database. It will match your first name and email address to a membership account. If you are a member, it will send you an email with your login information, just like the password reset before. So you'll get your username and you'll get a temporary password that you can then just come back to the screen, plug it in, and continue. Finally, if I log back in as Martin Smith, if we head over to the control panel and go back to my member profile, there is one more way for a password to get reset. We will talk more about group memberships in a few minutes, but if you are the leader of a group membership, so in this example, I am, Martin Smith here, we can head over to the section that says more member options, and there's an option for me to look at my additional members. So these are other members that I have. I am a primary and I have sub members. And we can see here I've got Mary Smith and Robert Smith. Robert Smith might be my son. Mary Smith is my wife. So these are secondary members that are within my own membership. I have the ability to hit the password reset button for them from here. So a primary member, even though they're not an admin, can go and help one of their secondary members reset their password from here. I can say reset password yes, and that's just like the same reset password process that we saw as an admin in the profile before. So it would send them an email with a temporary password and their username. All right. I do see questions before we move on. I see a couple questions referring to the password functions. There are a lot of questions about how long a temporary password is good for. It is temporary in the aspect that once you log in with it, it will not be usable anymore because you have to set a new password. But it is not temporary in the way of like a time frame. So once you are assigned a temporary password, that will stay good. That temporary password will last until you use it. So it doesn't expire. So you can hang on to that temporary password for, 5 days, a week, a month if you need to. But once you use it, it will force you to set a permanent password. So just keep that in mind. So there's not a time frame for temporary passwords. It is just temporary in the sense that you can only use it one time. All right. That's it for passwords. If we have more questions about that, we'll circle back again during the Q&A, but I'll go ahead and move on to our next question. Let me change back to our slides.
Alrighty, everyone. And by the way, great questions in the Q&A. Keep them coming. We're really, really excited to see these. So our next question that we are featuring, my event is not allowing people to register. It's a question that we get quite a bit. And what we're going to showcase is the event refresh or reset button. Probably like about a year ago, we introduced the event refresh button, and it caused a little bit of confusion with our users and what that button actually did. We've changed the name of the button, but not the function. So the name makes it a little less scary. And so we want to kind of highlight what that button does, why it's useful if your members or even non-members are experiencing issues registering for an event, when you should use it, and what are other things that you can check if clicking that button just isn't working and you are still having trouble getting people to register for your event. So the first thing that I want to do is show where that button is so that you know where you can find it. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm signed in as Martin Smith. Martin Smith is an administrator. I'm going to go into our events module and I'll go into any event. Let's say that we have a summer event coming up this weekend, and we're getting a couple of complaints from people that they're popping into the event, they're clicking that register now button, and they're getting an error and they're not able to go through with the registration process. I'm going to go into this event and I can see that just from my admin screen, I already have a couple of registrants. Whether or not you have registrants isn't always going to indicate if there's a huge problem. There could be a couple of people who were able to register and something happened on the back end where you need to refresh the event. So, what refreshing the event does is it refreshes the cache of the event and it pushes a fresh form of the event out to your system, to your calendar, and anywhere else that you have that event listed. Now, what the refresh event button doesn't do is reset any of your event details. Now, previously, the button was labeled reset event, and a lot of people thought that perhaps that button was going to erase some of the settings that they've created, erase the event contacts that they had added, the basic info. They were also concerned that it may end up removing some of the registrations that already were listed that clearly didn't have a problem. That's not the case. If you are experiencing, again, members and non-members who are having trouble registering for your event, you can click that refresh event button. You'll get a little pop-up at the very top. And you can see here, we still have our event contact. All of our options are still clicked or they're still green. So all of the information that we've entered into each of our panels is still there. And we'll pop into our registrations. All of our registrations are still here. Now, I want to talk quickly about some of the cases in which using that button may not make a difference for you and what else you can look at to kind of troubleshoot your own event. So, this is useful for users not being able to register, or if you're, say, on a custom page and you're adding a link to an event, if you're building an email and you're adding a link to an event and you're not seeing that event come up as an available future event. So if you've ever gone through and tried to create your newsletter and you want to link to an upcoming event and it's not there and you know you added it to your calendar, this may be one of those cases. This feature is not what you would use if your event isn't appearing in the event widget that you may have placed on your homepage or another page. There's a separate way to refresh the widget, and you're refreshing the widget itself. Now, let's say that you've experienced some of these issues. You're either not able to link to your event, your members can't register, you've refreshed the event, and you're not really sure what to do next. So the first thing that you're going to want to check is in basic info, is the event even visible? It's the simplest thing to check. Many people may have copied an event with visibility already set, and so they aren't aware that their event's not even supposed to be visible for another 2 weeks. Always check your visibility. Make sure that that date, that visible date is not filled in so that you know that your event should be appearing on the calendar. The next thing to double check, and we've kind of already seen this, is did you save all of your changes in the event builder? Double check that you have green dots in all of the right places, especially in who can register and registration and fees. One of the biggest points, and this is the next point to check, is have you configured who can register? So I'm going to cancel out of this basic info and pop into who can register. And we can see that we are allowing everyone to register. So if we're having that issue, refreshing the event, maybe we've popped in and we saw, oh, well, there's a reason non-members aren't able to register. It's because I'm only allowing members. So those are some of the basic things that you can check if your event isn't appearing for people, isn't appearing for yourself, or if your members or non-members are having trouble registering. Go through those steps to double check that the event is visible, that it can be registered for by the right people. And if all of that is true, you'll go ahead and refresh that event, and that'll push that event to your calendar. It'll make that event visible in all of those spaces where you may want to add a link as well. So let me just triple check here. Devin did a much better job of monitoring questions while he was speaking. So I want to pause and make sure, and maybe Devin can help me out if there were any questions that came up related to event refresh. I
The
see.
only Yeah, the only question I want to jump out to is some people are asking why it's necessary or shouldn't the event cache refresh on its own. It does refresh on its own, both periodically and in response to certain changes to the event. But once people start registering simultaneously, and if you are making changes, the most commonly when we see this issue, when we see issues with the cache arise, is when you make changes to the event at the same time that people are registering. In most cases, if you create the event and then publish it and then people start registering, this button's relatively unnecessary. Most commonly, if you are making changes simultaneously while people are registering, sometimes they can be registering for a cached version on their web page that is no longer applicable. Hitting that refresh button just means that it's going to kind of essentially just reset that cache ID. And whenever someone reloads their page, they'll get the most recent version of the event that's saved. It's just a way to help kind of kick the event to make sure that everyone is looking at the most updated version. Again, it should happen both periodically and in response to certain changes that you make to an event. This is just an additional way to manually get in there and say, I don't want to wait a couple minutes. I don't want to, have to make certain changes. I just want to reset the cache. It's an extra button. In most cases, it's unnecessary. We're just giving people the option to do it. Okay, so the next question that we get a lot is how do we kind of remove a secondary member or sometimes often remove a primary member without removing a secondary? So membership levels are sometimes a difficult concept to grasp because they come with a lot of different ways of interacting with the system. You always have to make sure that when you're an organization that has secondary and primary members, and again, this might not apply to some of you. Some of you might only have individual memberships, but if you do have group memberships, sometimes the differences between membership levels and what they can and can't do is a little bit complex. So, um, when you are setting up your membership types, you want to make sure that you are setting your correct membership types to have access to secondaries, and you want to allow them to, add and remove secondaries as needed. Um, you also want to make sure that your new member sign up process allows for additional members to be added if that is a required thing. That is something we see missed a lot. Um, there is an option for members and admins to add additional members just straight from the membership profile. We actually took a look at this page very briefly when we were talking about the membership password reset. And we want to also take a look at the people manager controls. So there is options to connect two individual members into a group membership. There's options to disconnect two members from each other to make them both one or both of them individual members. And then there's also options to just kind of flip around who is the primary member. So we don't have to, disconnect and reconnect them. We can just say, hey, this person was previously the secondary, and we want to upgrade them to primary. Um, there are a couple notes I want to call out, and I'll kind of point this out when I'm doing the demonstration, but something that gets messed up a lot, and this is one place where we get a lot of questions to our support team is, hey, I needed to drop a primary, but I didn't want to drop the secondary. Um, but when I dropped the primary, the secondary became dropped as well, and I didn't mean to. So always keep in mind if you are dropping a member or even just changing a member status at all of their sub members, so all of their secondary and even tertiary members are always the same membership type and the same membership status as their primary, because their primary is the one in charge of all of their dues and all of their membership fees. So if that primary member becomes expired, so do all of the secondaries and tertiaries. So let's go ahead and switch over to my screen share, and I'll kind of walk through that process and show you what I'm talking about. So here we are in the people manager. And when we're talking about primaries and secondaries, there's a couple ways that you can very quickly get an idea of what they look like. So if we just hit search here, you'll see right in the search results. I'm just searching for everyone. I'm not filtering by last name or anything like that. you'll see one of the columns in the search results is their membership level. Now, if you're an organization and all you see is primary all the way from top to bottom, then that probably means you're not using the secondary member function and that you can just kind of ignore this little section. But if you do see options like where you see people say secondary, or even tertiary for some of them, that means that you have members that are connected to other members and are what we would call sub members. They are members below in ranking or below in tier to another member. Whenever we see a secondary member or even a primary member, you can also quickly tell if they are connected to someone. If you look out in the icons over on the right-hand side, there's a special icon for primary and sub members. This little icon for the secondary will always take us to their primary's account. So right here, we can see we're looking at Jimmy here. And if we click on this icon, it won't take us to Jimmy's profile. It'll take us to Samantha's profile. So that will let us know this is taking us to Samantha, Jimmy's primary. And then likewise, if we look at a primary member, we might see a special icon that looks like two people with a little chain link option. We'll see Colleen Carter here. When we click on this icon, it will give us a little pop-up. Oh, Colleen doesn't actually have secondaries. Let's go to someone who does. Larry Cho. Here we go. Larry Cho does have secondary and tertiary members. We'll see for secondary members, we've got Greg Cho, who we were looking at earlier. We've also got Jenny Cho, and then we actually have tertiary members, Sally Cho. A lot of times we have people ask what's the difference between a secondary and tertiary members. For most like professional organizations, they'll only use one or the other. The big important difference between secondary and tertiary members is that secondary members can log in and interact with the website as normal. Tertiary members are there for informational and like membership purposes only. They cannot actually log into the website. Most commonly, when it comes to family memberships, we'll have, Larry Cho is the primary person who's going to pay for the family membership. Secondary is most often things like spouses. And then tertiary is often used as things for like children. So it might be, Larry and Jenny Cho are, married and their child, Sally, is also a member, but Sally doesn't need to be able to log in. For professionals, business organizations, they'll usually just use secondary members and they'll ignore tertiary altogether. And they'll say, hey, this is the president of our organization, and everyone else in the organization is listed as a secondary. So if we're going to make changes to a primary, so for example, Larry Cho here, if we were to drop Larry Cho, all of everyone, so Larry and Sally and Greg, they are all currently active and in a family membership. If I were to expire Larry Cho here, and I'll save, and now we can see that Larry Cho is now set to expired. You'll also see that Sally Cho here also just became expired. So anyone who is connected to Larry when that status is changed, any status changes will apply to all of the people in that membership as well. If we were to reinstate, so let's say activate, and we will say, the date is going to be 2025. When I reactivate, you'll see the entire family membership reactivates along with Larry as well. There are also options to kind of connect and disconnect members. We can do that from the primary members profile page. So if we go over to the pencil icon over here for Larry, you'll see in the member profile, there's an option to go down to the more member options section, and you'll see chapters, additional members. From here, we can add and remove additional members. So we can say we've got Greg Cho here, and we can remove Greg Cho from this membership. If we remove this member here, it will drop that member entirely. So it will set that member status to dropped. It will not just separate them into their own profile. It would remove them from the organization. So you want to be careful with removing members from there. We can also add members. So you can see we still have room in our membership for tertiary members, and we could add another tertiary member here. You'll notice that there is not an add button next to secondary members. It looks like our family membership that Larry Cho is a part of is set to a maximum of 2, Greg and Ginny, 2 secondary members. So we are currently at our maximum number. If we were to remove Greg, then we would most likely be allowed to add another secondary member again because we're not at that maximum anymore. Another option for managing group memberships, if we go back to our people manager, when we look at our member options up here, you'll see there's an option that says level changes. This is the tool we can use to disconnect, change around, reconnect our group membership. So when we click level changes, a lot of people get confused sometimes because they'll do something like they'll search for Cho and hit search and then click on level changes. And they'll think that because they've searched for these people, when I click on level changes, it will be applying to them. Keep in mind, when I click level changes here, it's completely unrelated to our search that we see down here. So clicking level changes, this is its own little separate pop out, unrelated to the search and search results that we have down here. When we click on level changes, we're presented with a number of options. We can promote a secondary member to primary. So what this would do is it take an existing secondary member and it would change them to the primary. The previous primary would then become a secondary. So before we were looking at Larry Cho was the primary, we can say, I want Sally to be the primary. So I can go search for Cho and I can say I want, or sorry, Jenny, not Sally Cho. Jenny Cho is going to be the primary. And if I select this, you can see now we've selected Jenny Cho to become primary and I can save. When we look at these, when we look at this family now, we'll see Jenny Cho is now the primary and Larry Cho has now become a secondary. So they just traded places, and now Jenny Cho now has Greg and Larry as secondaries and Sally as a tertiary. Those are all now in different places. It's pretty easy to swap around who the primary is. So if you ever have, a group of people and one of them is the primary and they want, the other, you can switch them like that. Another option under level changes is to link a solo to a primary. So if we have an existing primary member, let's say we just made Jenny a primary, so we'll choose Jenny. And we can choose another individual member. We'll say, Wilbur here. We can select, and this would add Wilbur as a secondary to Jenny. So this would just be another way to add an existing individual member to someone else's membership, and they would then be connected as primary and secondary. We also have the reverse option. We can unlink. So we can say, I currently have Larry. Larry is a secondary, and I want Larry to be his own member. So I can say I want Larry to be in his own membership. And you'll notice because we're now disconnecting these people, we can actually retype. So we can say Larry, since he's going to be an independent, he's no longer going to be a family membership. He's just going to be an individual member. And we can save. And now we see that we have Larry Cho as an individual member. If we wanted to undo that and say, actually, that was an accident, we want to reconnect, we could just reuse that link option that we just saw. We can always go and back and undo that and say, I want to relink Larry to Jenny. Then there's also these last two options where we can take a secondary member and turn them into a tertiary, or vice versa. We can change a tertiary member into a secondary. So let's say, Sally is currently a tertiary and we want Sally to be a secondary member because let's say, she turned 13 and now she gets to be a full member and log in. She's no longer a child member. So we can go over here and we can say Sally, or no, we want to search for Cho. And there's Sally. Only Sally shows up under Cho because Sally's the only tertiary here. And we can save. And now Sally Cho is a secondary member and now has the ability to log into the website and behave like a full member of the website. All right. Let's see. I see that there's a couple questions. Is there a maximum number of secondary members in a family membership? So you can set your own maximum. If we go back to the control panel and we go down to member types, when we go and look at our family membership, when we click on the pencil to make changes to it, you'll see there's an option for secondary members and tertiary members. So for our gold family membership, we allow up to 3 secondary members. We can change that. We can say, actually, I want up to 4, or oh, we've set a maximum outside. We'll talk about that in just a second. But we can say I only want 2 or just 1. And for tertiary members, I want, just 1. You can also say if this is a situation where it's supposed to be a, spousal setting, We can say I want a minimum for family memberships. You have a minimum of one and a maximum of one, meaning you have to have one. You cannot have less than or more than one secondary member in order to have a family membership. Um, if you have, you're allowing up to 3 children for tertiary members, something like that. If you want to go above a number and you're hitting that increased number and it's not letting you go higher, like it just happened to me, that means that there is a setting behind the scenes, something that ClubExpress controls that is setting a limit to it. Something that you may or may not know about: secondary members and tertiary members are billed differently than primary members. So we put a limit on that outside so that you're not able to say, I want 300 secondary members so that my club gets charged less. Um, if you want to have, say 10 or 12 secondary members, ClubExpress is most likely fine with that. All you need to do is just reach out to us and say, hey, I want to increase the number of secondary memberships that are allowed. And we can go and change that setting behind the scenes. So you just need to come into your membership. Again, to get here, you just go to your control panel. It's under the People tab. You'll find setup, member types, and then when you edit any of these member types, they will all have the option to have secondary members, and you can change the numbers from there. All right. I think that's all I've got for group memberships. If we have questions that I didn't see, then we will circle back to them at the end. I'll go ahead and switch back over to Sam and let me give you your slide.
Thank you very much, Devin. All right. Our next question that we are going to tackle today is email scheduling. So, how do I set a blast email to go out at midnight? So, this is a feature that we've had for a few years now. You do have the ability to schedule emails that you're sending out using blast emailing built into ClubExpress to go out at a specific time. Now, just to be super clear, these are different from system emails that will go out based on user action. So, these are emails that you might be sending, like newsletters, a note from your president, things announcing upcoming events that you're hosting. So when you schedule an email to send out, you pick the date and the time. You also have to go through a process of saying that the email is ready for delivery, even though you're not intending to send it right then. One of the issues that comes up is that if you happen to need to make changes to that email, let's say you've scheduled your newsletter to send out next week, and then you go back in and you realize that you made a couple typos and you want to add in a couple more photos. Now you need to go back in and make changes. You can still do that, but we want to make sure that your email still actually goes out. And there's a last step that a lot of people miss. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to go back into our demo site. And I'm going to pop into our communications tab and emailing. And we have a couple of emails that have already been drafted and are scheduled to be sent. So let's take a look at just a quick set of some of the statuses here. We have draft emails, we have emails that were already sent. The status column is going to be really helpful for you in finding emails that you have worked on, emails that you're still working on, and emails that you've scheduled to send out. Now, when we are in a draft email, let's open up a draft that has not been scheduled to send out. And I'll click that edit icon and we'll go into the basics. In our basics, to schedule an email to be sent on another date and time, I'll go ahead and put my subject line in here so I don't forget about that. I'll set the date and time, choose the date, choose the time, and that's it. And now we click save. Now, once you've added in any additional information, we'll go ahead and just quickly add in a distribution list. And we'll save that. Now at the bottom, we have our ready for delivery option. Even though we haven't added in some additional elements here, I can save and continue and save and close. And that's not going to save my scheduled send. It's only going to save my work, any of those options. If I want to schedule this email to send out, if I'm done working on the email, I've added in the future date and time that I want this email to be sent, I have to click ready for delivery. It is not going to send your email immediately. I frequently double check before I hit ready for delivery that I have in fact scheduled the email and that it is not ready to be sent right now. I'll go ahead and click ready for delivery, confirm, and now I can see that my email that I just created as a test is scheduled for delivery. Now, let's say I have this newsletter that I've created and I'm kind of going back through it and I realize that I need to make a couple of changes. This newsletter is scheduled to go out at 7:30 in a couple of days. And I'm looking at it and I realize, oh gosh, I need to change the date, I need to change the name or a photo. I can make those changes, but remember, saving my changes is not going to save the scheduled send. If I go back in and make changes, if I want to edit this to say welcome to fall and save my changes, I can save and close these changes. But because I have entered into editing the email, now I can see that the schedule or the status has been overridden. And now my email is back in draft status. That email is not going out when you scheduled it to send originally. That date will come and go, and your email will sit here waiting for you to say that it's ready for delivery again. The minute that you create changes, it pulls that email out of the queue to be sent and assumes that it should not be sent until you confirm again this is ready for delivery. Once I click ready for delivery, we'll go ahead and just let me cancel out of this. Take a look at my changes. Welcome to fall. I want to click ready for delivery again. And now we can see we're not in draft status anymore. And I'm back to what I would like to call my scheduled programming. That email is going to go out at 7:30 a.m. on that date. So remember, you do have the ability to not only schedule those emails, but still continue to make changes and work on them if you need to. Just because you've saved and scheduled an email, it doesn't mean that that email is off limits to you. It's a really great thing to be able to go back in, add in an extra event, maybe add in another donation that you want to spotlight, but you do need to remember to click that ready for delivery button again. All right, that one was a little bit of a shorter one. So, Devin, let's take a look at the questions and see what we had here. If there were any questions related to emailing. And
There
in
Yeah, I was going to point one out that gets brought up a lot is, when I've set an email either to send now or scheduled it for a certain minute, it may not go out exactly that minute. Especially with send now options. This is common practice for bulk email senders. Just a peek behind the curtains a little bit. When you're sending like hundreds or thousands of emails like Club Express does, what we do is we send them in bulk batches. So our email server has to process those, and it can take, 5 to 7 minutes to process that, depending on how many emails it is. So every once in a while, you may hit send on an email, and it may be 5 to 7 minutes before it actually goes out. Depending on your timing, you might actually hit send and have it go out 10 seconds later. It just depends on where our server is in the process when you hit ready now. There's not really a way to tell or time it so that when you hit it, it sends out immediately. So just be aware of that. There's not really anything we can do about it to make it send the moment you hit send. It's unfortunately very different from like a personal email where you hit send and yours is the only one that has to get processed. So if you ever notice that your email, that you hit send now on is sitting queued for 5 or 6 minutes, it most likely just means you hit send early in that batching process and it will go out with the next batch. Um,
One thing that I did want to point out, we are getting so many amazing suggestions on things that are maybe new for people, different ways to present information. For example, changing the ready for delivery button to ready to schedule delivery. These are great suggestions. We would love for anyone who has any of those suggestions to send them to ideas@clubexpress.com. It's so that our development team has one space that they're receiving those. They actually use those to map out the work that they perform on the product on a quarterly basis. So make sure to send those enhancement requests to ideas@clubexpress.com.
all right, let me go ahead and move over to our next slide. So the next slide, and this is one some of you who've been with Club Express for a while may remember me from the support team. I was on the support team originally, and this was a question I really wanted to be on this webinar because this is a question I got all the time. It's one that is very understandably difficult to comprehend from time to time, but a question I got all the time is I've canceled an event and it's still showing up on my calendar. Why is it still there? I canceled it. We do that on purpose. So when you are canceling an event, you are changing its status from active to canceled. Club Express likes to attempt to kind of like predict what you want to do, but we can't always predict what everyone wants to do. So what we do is when you cancel an event, we mark that event as canceled and we add the word canceled in bold to the end of the event title, but we leave it on the calendar for people to see that the event has been canceled. Um, if you wanted to cancel an event or remove an event or postpone an event and you wanted it to temporarily or permanently disappear, what we need to do is affect the event's visibility, not its, per se status. So there's a couple options when it comes to removing an event that you can kind of approach. A lot of people will want to delete an event entirely, say, I want no trace of it. There is an option to do that, but keep in mind you can only delete events if it has no registrations. Once an event has registrations on it, it cannot be deleted. It can be archived, it can be removed, it can be canceled, all of those things. But we can only delete events with no registrations. The reason for that is because registrations, whether they have a dollar value attached to them or not, they are tracked as transactions. So when I register for an event, it may be, a $0 registration, but it is stored in that member's profile that they register for that event. And if I delete that event, then suddenly there's a missing item in that member's history. We can archive it to make it disappear and it will stay in the archives without being visible to members, but we have to just maintain that for records purposes. So once an event is created, if no one signed up for it, you can delete it. But once someone registers, it changes from the delete option to what we call the archive option. If you cancel an event, like I said, it'll show up on the calendar as canceled. And there's a couple options we can take to get it off of our calendar. We can either just change the visibility of the event to not visible, or we can archive the event from the event manager page. So I'm going to go through kind of that whole process and what it looks like. So let me change over to my screen share. So this is our event calendar. This is our demo site, so it's pretty empty, but you can see on the 30th, we have a new summer event. If we go and click on it, this is currently an active event. We can go and click on our event and we can go to click into show our admin options. And from here, we can cancel our event. If I hit cancel, it's going to say, are you sure? And I'm going to say, yes, of course I'm sure. It's going to say, are you really, really sure? Because we try to make sure that you don't accidentally cancel an event. And this is when I'll tell you the reason we ask you to truly confirm is once an event is truly canceled, there is no going back. Even Club Express admins on the backside, people like me and our support team, once it's canceled, it is changed in the database to canceled and the event is gone. You can always copy it and recreate it, but this actual event is canceled. So I'm going to go ahead and confirm I'm going to cancel this event. And you'll notice that the title of the event has changed. It says a new summer event canceled. When we go back to our calendar, it is still on our calendar. It says a new summer event canceled. So that's what's going to show up on your calendar. That's what people get confused about. They say, hey, I've canceled it. Shouldn't it disappear? It can disappear if we click on it. We as admins can take it off the calendar in a number of ways. If we go over to the show admin options section, the first and easiest option I like to show people to get an event off the calendar is just to change your basic info. So this section right here for basic information, we can go in here and we can just say for our visibility option. So if we scroll down to about halfway down this section, you'll see visibility. And right now it's set to visible to everyone. Only members can see details. There is an option in here that just says not visible. I don't want it to show up on the calendar. And all we have to do is save that option. And now when we go and look at our calendar, it's gone. So it's still canceled. Anyone that signed up would still get a cancellation notice. It's still going to be in the canceled status for our event, but it no longer shows up on the calendar. It's invisible. There is another option when we are kind of managing our events. We can go to our control panel and we can go to our events section in the website tab. So this is going to be under website modules, website tab of the control panel. Click on events. And once an event is canceled, a lot of times people will come through here and they will look for that event to go change its visibility or archive it, and they won't see it. So coming up, on the 30th, we don't see that event right here. So it should be somewhere in here. It's coming up on August 30th and it's not showing up. Once an event is canceled, its status is different. And by default, the event manager is only going to show you active events. So if we look at event status right here on our search page, there's only 3 items automatically checked. One of the ones that remains unchecked by default is canceled. So if we say instead, I want to go and just search for my canceled events, we'll see there it is. There's our new summer event canceled. And I can use this function to go in and I can click on the pencil and I can go back to basic info and I can make it visible again if I wanted to. And so I'll go ahead and make it visible to everyone and save. And that would put it back on our calendar. Once again, we can see it right on our calendar. Another option we have once we are looking at events that have been canceled or an event that is no longer taking place, we can go to the event manager. And I mentioned archived a couple times. So when we are looking at our active events, you'll see that there are a handful of icons out on the right-hand side, and there's our summer event canceled. We can look and we'll see there's a couple different icons. We have this icon that looks like a little brown filing cabinet with a green arrow. That is our archive icon. That means the only option to remove this event is to archive it. Then there is also our trash can icon, which is the option to archive or delete it. That means we have the option to delete it. You'll notice some of these have the archive option and some of these have the trash can option. There will never be both. You will only ever get one or the other. And you'll notice things. There will be some that will say there are 0 registrants and it will still have the icon option. So keep in mind, if someone registers for an event and then cancels their registration, that still counts as a registration on that event, even though it is canceled. It is just a canceled registration. Once someone registers, even if they cancel, that event can never be deleted. It can only be archived. Don't get scared of that. It doesn't mean that you're going to, fill up your calendar with a bunch of archived events or anything like that. There's no limit to the storage on events. So you can absolutely just have, thousands of archived events if you're, an organization that hosts lots of events and then removes them. So it's not going to clutter your system up or anything like that. When we're looking at archiving an event, if we want it to go away, archive will also make it not visible. So once it's archived, it'll only show up in this manager and only if we're searching for that status of event. So let's go ahead and say we're going to archive this event. So here's our canceled new summer event, and we can archive it. You can choose to change its category if you would like. For this example, I'm going to go ahead and say it's still a social event. So I'm going to leave that category alone and I'll just hit archive. And you'll notice that it immediately drops off the list. And now if we wanted to search for it, we would have to come in here and include archived in our search. And there it is now. So we can see now it's in the status archived. It's a canceled event. It's been archived. We do have the option to unarchive it if we want, and that will put it back in the canceled status. So if we wanted to make it show up on the calendar, archived events will never show up on the calendar. So archiving it is also a way to make it go invisible. If there is an event that has the trash can icon, meaning no one has tried to sign up for it yet, you can actually delete it completely. So you'll have the option when you click on the trash can to choose between I want to set it to archive so I can save it, or I can just delete it outright. Keep in mind, if you delete it, any work you've put into that, any pictures that you've added, any text you've added, when you delete it, all of that is gone. So if we save here, that event I just deleted is actually truly deleted and there is no getting it back. So be careful when you're deleting things. If you've put a lot of work into an event, you may want to archive it so you can, maybe copy it in the future. So for example, this canceled summer event, we could just copy it if we wanted to, if we want to move it to a different date. Even though it's archived, we can still use it as a template in the future. That is, I think, all I've got for event cancellation. Are there any, let's see, Sam, are there any questions related to event status and event cancellation?
So there were a couple. Does once an event's been canceled and then reinstated, If you want to differentiate your canceled event between the new event, you would definitely want to maybe add something into the title of the event so that members know that. There was another question. Let me go ahead and scroll through it here. There were a couple of questions about dates, multiple date events, and canceling those. So when you are canceling a multi-date event, you are either canceling all of the dates for that event or you're canceling an individual date for that event. And the same rules apply. So if someone has already registered for your multi-date event, and you want to cancel just an individual occurrence, you won't be able to cancel it, or you want to delete an individual occurrence, you'll only have to be able to cancel it. And the same kind of process applies. Anyone who's registered will get a notice, and that individual item, that individual date, will have that cancellation notice. If no one has registered, you'll be able to simply delete that occurrence of your multi-date event.
And one more question I'll answer before we move on to our next question is why do we present the option to change category? Sometimes people will have a category for archived events. So someone might want to keep their, categories very tight and say, hey, once we archive it, we have a category called archived events. We had a couple clubs request that, and so we just added that as an option. It'll always, when you're archiving an event, so you can see this is a balloon ride category. When we go to archive this, it'll default to the category that it is. So if you don't want to change the category, all you do is just hit archive and just leave the category exactly as it is. But if you had a category called archived events, you could just keep all of your archived events in that category. So it's just an organization tool. You don't have to change the category, just something that we provide. Um, all right, let's go ahead and move on to our next question.
Thank you, Devin. Our next question is about forum listservs. My members aren't receiving emails when forum posts are made. So let's talk about what listservs even are for those of you who maybe aren't using forums or who are only using forums online. Listservs are a way to push out all of the messages posted into a forum to your members' email. And it also allows those members to post to the forum by replying to that email. So it kind of mimics a forward chain where people might be just replying to the entire email chain that they've gotten. And it works with just members accessing that from their email. And we are saying members because remember, non-members do not have the ability to post to forums. They may have the ability to view them, but they would never have the ability to post to them. An online only forum is just that. Your members are only viewing the posts online and they are only interacting with those posts online. Now, many people who use forums and who have come to ClubExpress having used a lot of bigger forums, they might be used to the idea of that listserv. But for many people who are just starting forums for the first time, they're only using it online. So we want to kind of talk about some of the benefits, the pros and cons, at least to help direct you if using listservs is something that you're interested in doing. And then we'll talk about what you can do to get that set up. Now, there are other emails that are related to forums that we are not talking about in this specific instance. Listserv emails are completely different from the emails that may go out to forum members to let them know that there have been posts made. A listserv is what is allowing members to be able to reply and post from their email. It doesn't necessarily control whether those members are just getting forum emails. Those are different types of emails. Now, if you are interested in listservs, it helps members who just prefer using email to communicate back and forth. If your members are not logging into your website and they're not interacting with your website, but you know that they're really engaged with forums, it's a great way to still continue to keep that engagement. Now, if you want to host your forums online, of course, that drives more traffic to your website. It creates that unified experience. It avoids any email provider issues. So if you have listservs set up and you have forum emails going out, there may be spam filters on your members' end that aren't allowing those emails to get through. So that online forum kind of skips over that. Now, are there special requirements to being able to host a listserv as opposed to just an exclusively online forum? And the answer is yes. We have to be handling email for your domain because we are sending out those emails on behalf of you to your organization that include all of those messages. So we must be handling email. Now, how will you kind of know the difference? Maybe you're a little bit new to your organization and you're not sure if we're handling email for you or not. Let me go ahead and I want to show two different websites and the forums on each of those. I'm still in one of our demo clubs. This demo club does not have email that's being handled by ClubExpress. Now, when I go into any one of my forums, whether I'm creating a forum for the first time or looking at a previous forum, underneath my posting method, I only have the option to create an online only forum. I am not having email routed through ClubExpress, so I cannot allow my users to post via email. Now, keep in mind, this is something to note. Just because you're configuring your forum potentially as a listserv, it doesn't mean that your members can't interact with the forum online. Now, let's look at a site where we are actually handling email, and we're on just a slightly different demo club. And I'm going to go into forums. And I'll select one of the forums here. I'll edit it and we'll take a look at how it looks a little bit different. Under posting method, that online and via email option is not grayed out. And when I select it, I am presented with email domains that I have already asked ClubExpress to handle. And it allows me to configure the email address that I want those messages to come from for the people who are part of that forum. Now, when you're asking ClubExpress to handle email, there might be other reasons why you've asked them to handle email. Perhaps it's because of the way that you want your blast emails and your system emails to appear for your users. This is another reason why you may want ClubExpress to handle email for you. There are a handful of articles within our help system that walk you through the items that our support team would need from you in order for ClubExpress to manage your domain's email. And in order for you to be able to push out forum messages to your members and allow them to reply back to those messages from their email. Apart from that, remember that these emails are different from the emails that are being sent out to members just because they are members of the forum. So when we take a look at forum general preferences and memberships, this is where members are controlling whether or not they want to receive those emails. They may decide to turn them off altogether. That's another reason why you may opt to host your forums online. But if you are interested in setting up that listserv and allowing your members to not only read those forum posts from their email, but reply to them as well, you'll need to ask ClubExpress to manage the email that's coming from your domain that you already own. There are a couple of items that you'll need to provide to us from your domain provider or your domain registrar, I believe. And those are the things that our support team plugs into the back end, and we're able to then send out emails on your behalf using your domain. All right, let's see if there are any additional questions. Oh, and handle emails, great question. So, handling emails, meaning that ClubExpress will be sending emails on your behalf using your domain. So, as opposed to emails coming from, I'm not quite sure what the default email is that ClubExpress emails appear from. But if you want the emails that are being sent on behalf of your club to appear with your domain, so whether that is northwestballoonclub.com or if that's, you know, windy city balloonclub.com or .org, whatever your domain happens to be, if you want all of those emails to appear as though they are coming from your domain, Club Express will need to make a couple of adjustments on the back end of your site. And that will include you providing just a couple of pieces of info, very similar to if you have a domain name that you wanted to use for your site instead of using a subdomain like you see here, democlub.clubexpress.com. That's what allows us to do that for you. So, just a couple of pieces of information. There really isn't too much that you need to do yourself. Again, just those couple pieces of information for our support team, and they can make those changes for you. And all right, let's tackle our final question. Our old president is still getting emails that should be going to me. How frustrating is that? This is something that we see quite a bit, especially with the nature of all of your organizations, where many of you are not only wearing different hats, but sometimes you throw one hat off to put another on, and all of these changes can happen really quickly. The great news is that changing those settings on your Club Express site takes about 3 minutes max, and it ensures that all of those emails are going to the right person. So, something that we try to tackle at least once a year is managing your contacts and titles and managing notifications that are going to a couple of the, I would say, the most important officers within your organization, your membership director and your treasurer, people that might need to communicate with your members a little more often than the rest of your officers. Those are also a couple of the contacts that are included automatically in a lot of your system emails. So it's not just about making sure that the contact us page on your site has the right people listed. It's also about making sure that in any system email where we're pulling the membership director's information or the treasurer's information, that we actually have the right info to pull into those emails automatically. So let's take a look at our site and take a look at one, where those contacts and titles live, and two, where you set up those notifications. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So we're back in our control panel, and we're going to take a look at our club tab. Big, big, big disclaimer. You may not have a club tab. Your tab might be labeled differently depending on the organization type that you're in. You might see league, you might see association, you could see any number of things. The tab that we're always talking about when we say club tab is nestled right between money and communications. You should be seeing your data export options in admin functions. Under setup, you should see name and description as one of the first options. So we want to take a look at titles in the setup section and the contact us module in the website module section. When you are adding your membership director or your treasurer or any other officer to your website, you want to create the title, and then you want to tell the system, okay, who is actually assigned to that title. So the system knows whose email address, whose phone number, whose name do I need to say is this title. In titles, and we've gotten a couple of these questions, what are some of the common titles that you might be using? We have a handful that are configured already: finance chair, membership director, president. They may not be titles that we at Club Express have. So your membership director could be called membership director, but your treasurer may not be called treasurer. Maybe they're called the finance director. That doesn't matter to the system or to us. What matters is that when you add in your finance director title, and we'll go ahead and edit this option here. When you've added in your finance director title, you tell the system that this person is the treasurer. The reason you do that is so that the system knows that that person who's listed on your contact page is the treasurer. And any emails that are supposed to go to the treasurer will go to whoever is identified as the finance director in your database. We're going to show you how to identify someone as the finance director in a second. Same thing with your membership director. We'll go ahead and cancel out of this and we'll take a look at our membership director. We want to tell the system that the person that we are identifying as the membership director holds the title as membership director so that anywhere the system's looking for the membership director's information, it knows to pull it with whoever's paired with this title. The second thing that you're noticing is an email address. These are email addresses that are associated with the title in your organization, not the person. We see a lot of organizations saying, oh, well, my membership director is Sally, and Sally's email is sally@gmail.com. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that in here. That's not the way you want to do that. This is an email address that is associated with the title and never changes. So you can see here, we might have membership@clubexpress.com, finance@northwestballoonclub.com. It doesn't matter if Sally's the membership director, if Rob is the membership director, the email address never changes. That's when you want to add in that blanket email address that your organization uses for that title. What that does is that displays that email address both on your website, and it also could potentially be used for all of that contact information for that particular person. Now, let's take a look at where you make all of those final decisions. Back in our control panel, once we've got those titles created and we've told the system which titles are supposed to be what's supposed to be our treasurer, what's supposed to be our membership director, we can go in to our contacts and assign a person to those titles. So here we have assigned a couple of people already to our membership director and our finance director titles. When we take a look at Orville, who's been assigned membership director, we can change Orville's title. So if Orville is stepping down as membership director and he's going to become co-chair of something, we can change that title. Right now, he's membership director. We've opted to show some of his information, but at the very bottom, we get to choose which email address we want to show. We're showing the title because our organization has specific email addresses that they use for all of those officer positions. If instead, maybe Orville prefers to have everything come to his personal email, maybe he wants to use the member's email address instead, that's an option. If you have more than one person who is sitting in a specific committee, maybe you have a membership director and a membership co-chair, a membership assistant, you may opt to show maybe the personal email address of some of those additional people and the title address for your top membership director. All of that is something that your organization configures. Now, the second part of that, let's go ahead and save that as the title. Once you've added your titles and you've assigned members in your database to those specific titles, you're kind of halfway there. You've determined if they are appearing on your contact page. If you've assigned the contact and the title, that information gets communicated to system emails whenever it's time for those to go out. What you need to then do is double check that you are allowing notifications to go out to the right person. So in the People tab, under People Options, this is where you're going to configure your membership director's communications. At the very bottom, under Miscellaneous Options, you have the opportunity to notify your membership director after certain things have taken place, whether it's payment, sign up, or renewal for members. But that only works if you have a contact that is assigned to that title. So you have to make sure that those items are set. Double check that if you're using that title email address, that title email address is set up correctly. Double check if you're using that member's email address and that the member's email address is even entered correctly in their member profile. The second spot where you would set up additional communications that are based on titles and contacts that you would have added to your site is in the Money tab under Money Options. And that's where your treasurer will pop in and make sure that they're getting the right notifications that they need. So if I scroll down just a little bit, under payment options, you have the option to either notify the treasurer when a payment is made or not notify the treasurer. So there aren't as many granular options that you might have with a membership director. Treasurers will only receive notification on payment, not necessarily when a transaction is created. That could potentially be a lot of emails. And if you have members who maybe make edits to events that they're registering for, things in their shopping cart, that could create a lot of unnecessary email. So you're getting an email on payments or not. And again, it's all dependent on whether or not you have not only added that title, but paired that title or assigned that title to a website contact. There are a couple of additional questions that come up quite a bit. Whether or not you can have more than one person receive those emails. No. The quick answer to that is no, not built into the system. When you add multiple membership directors, multiple treasurers, it's not going to guarantee that multiple people who are assigned to that title will get those emails. Those emails will likely just go to the first person that you assigned as the contact for that title, and no one else is going to get them. And that's also not guaranteed. It may be the second person that gets that email. The best way to ensure that a group of people are notified is to set up some sort of forwarding rule externally from this site. So if your email for your membership director team is membership@northwestballoonclub.com, we'd recommend that you set up some sort of forwarding with that particular email address to forward it to everyone who needs to see it. There isn't a way, and certainly not a reliable way to configure that on your own website. And let's double check here and see what other kinds of questions that we have.
We've
And
gotten,
there,
I was going to say, we've gotten a lot of questions. Some of them should probably be taken to support people having, specific issues with things. Always remember if you're having um, specific trouble with some module that doesn't seem to be behaving the way you think it should, that's a great question for support. We can definitely help explain things, but we don't have a direct line to a lot of the current ongoing issues like our support team does. So always keep that in mind.
Right. And so to kind of recap a couple of additional things here. So some typical names that we have a lot of questions about handling emails and domains, and there are a couple of kind of basic things to keep in mind. Email names for a club could be info at Northwest Balloon Club, membership at Northwest Balloon Club, finance or even payments at Northwest Balloon Club if you want to give a general email address for people to respond to you with payment and transaction questions. And is there a way to set up notices for payments for specific types of charges for anyone other than the treasurer? Not really. There are some instances where you may be able to add a contact to an item on your site that carries a charge, like an event or a donation, or an ad hoc form where, registering for the event indicates that that person has made a payment, or filling out the form again indicates that they've made a payment, but there isn't a way to sort of set up an individual notification to say, I want this person to receive notifications only when an additional charge is created or only when something else has been paid for on your site, something specific. So the best way for that, again, maybe setting up some sort of forwarding rules based on what's in the email itself, or what's in the subject line or the body of the email. But that isn't something that's built into your Club Express site.
And I wanted to answer a question about why organizations don't receive emails about bad emails. Um, the main reason we don't send email notifications about that, one is that it's pretty easy to access through the control panel, and two is we try to avoid being perceived as like spammy with our emails. And there are a lot of our organizations that send regular emails to 10 or 15,000 members. And if, 5% of those are bad, we're going to be sending hundreds of bad email notices. And that's, across just a couple of our organizations. So we also have to be equitable to our clients. So we can't just be, only our smaller clients have access to get emails about bad emails. So, we don't want to be sending thousands of emails to our admins just to let them know about bad emails. If it's something you think is happening to you, I would just say keep a close eye. Maybe once a week, just go check on your bad email list in your control panel. Would be a pretty easy way to keep tabs on that. Um, let's see. I think that's most of the pressing questions. We went a lot longer than our normal webinars do, so I'll go ahead and start wrapping up. I want to thank everyone. We had a great turnout for today's webinar, and I think we'll probably try to do webinars like these more often so that we can, make sure that we're addressing the questions that our support team is getting the most often. So if you have questions like these, please send them to our support team so that we can stay up to date on these things, especially if you're having issues where you're having problems. Don't be afraid to email our support team. That's what they're there for. And we'll see you in our next webinar in a few weeks. Thank you so much.